What would you do if the person you vowed to love forever was hiding a secret so shocking it would shatter your entire world? A secret so devastating, it didn't just destroy trust, it led to unspeakable tragedy. In the quiet suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, the story of Andre Peterson and Sophia Reed seemed like a perfect love story. Two people drawn together by fate, building a life full of hope, laughter, and dreams. But perfection has a way of hiding cracks. Behind closed doors, their love was haunted by a secret. A truth so dark, it would drive one of them to commit a crime so horrifying that even seasoned detectives struggled to comprehend it. This isn't just a story of love gone wrong. It's about betrayal, anger, and the devastating consequences of a truth revealed too late. Stay with us as we uncover the events that turned Andre and Sophia's love story into a chilling nightmare, leaving behind questions that still haunt everyone who knew them. Andre Peterson was the kind of man people respected, a 34-year-old contractor known for his strong work ethic and unwavering dedication. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a quiet demeanor that exuded confidence, Andre was a staple in his Atlanta neighborhood. He was the one people called when they needed advice, a helping hand, or someone to lean on. Raised in a family that valued tradition and loyalty, Andre believed in the importance of hard work, family, and above all, trust. From an early age, he had embraced these values. His parents, devout churchgoers, instilled in him the belief that a man's worth was measured by how well he provided for and protected his loved ones. And Andre took that role seriously, whether it was helping his aging parents with house repairs or mentoring younger men in his community. Andre was someone who carried the weight of responsibility with pride. Sophia Reed was the kind of woman who could light up any room she walked into. At 29, she was stunning. Her radiant smile and warm brown eyes had a way of drawing people in. A talented hairstylist, Sophia had built a name for herself in Atlanta's beauty scene. Her clients loved her not just for her skill, but for her ability to make everyone feel seen and valued. Sophia's charm wasn't limited to her work. Friends described her as magnetic, someone who could turn a casual conversation into a moment you'd remember forever. And it was that charisma, that undeniable spark, that caught Andre's attention at a local community event. Their connection was instant. What started as a polite exchange of words quickly blossomed into something deeper. Within weeks, Andre was introducing Sophia to his family, beaming with pride as he watched her fit seamlessly into his world. His parents adored her, his friends envied their connection, and Andre was smitten. Sophia, for her part, seemed just as invested. She would often talk about their future, about the family they would build together, the life they would create. And Andre, ever the traditionalist, couldn't wait to make it official. So less than a year after their first meeting, he got down on one knee and proposed. Sophia said yes, tears streaming down her face, and for a moment it seemed like nothing could come between them. But even fairy tales can hide dark secrets, and as the months went by, subtle cracks began to form in their seemingly perfect love story. Cracks that Andre, blinded by his affection for Sophia, either didn't notice or chose to ignore. Little did he know, those cracks would grow, and the secret Sophia was hiding would change everything. At first, Andre Peterson didn't notice the small changes. In the beginning, everything seemed perfect. Sophia was attentive, loving, and always eager to share her day with him. But as the months went by, subtle shifts in her behavior began to surface. Shifts that were easy to dismiss at first, but harder to ignore as they became more frequent. It started with small things. Conversations that once flowed easily became clipped and vague. When Andre asked Sophia about her day, she'd respond with vague answers, her tone distant. Gone were the detailed stories about her clients at the salon or her plans for the future. Instead, she'd deflect his questions with a smile and quickly changed the subject. It was unlike her, but Andre, ever trusting, told himself it was nothing. The changes didn't stop there. Sophia, who once seemed inseparable from her phone, now guarded it as if it held her deepest secrets, Whenever Andre walked into the room, she'd quickly lock the screen or turn it face down. If he asked who she was talking to, she'd give nonchalant answers like, "Oh, just a friend," or "work stuff." Late nights at the salon became more frequent. Sophia would call Andre to say she was running behind with clients, sometimes not returning home until well past midnight. At first, Andre believed her. She was ambitious after all, and her growing client list was something she'd often talked about. But one evening, Andre decided to surprise her with dinner at the salon, only to find the shop dark and empty. Confused, he called her, and when she answered, the sound of muffled voices and music filled the background. She claimed she was finishing up with a late appointment. Andre didn't press her that night, but the seed of doubt had been planted. As the weeks went on, Sophia's behavior became harder to ignore. She'd leave the house abruptly, claiming she needed to run errands or meet with friends Andre had never heard of before. When he asked for more details, she'd grow defensive, brushing off his questions as if they were unnecessary. "Why do you always ask so many questions, Andre? Can't a girl have a little privacy?" she'd say with a laugh, but her tone carried an edge that made Andre uneasy. There were moments of intimacy, too, that felt different. Sophia, who once met Andre's gaze with warmth and love, now seemed distant, even when they were together. Her touches felt mechanical, her smiles forced. She'd often turn away from him in bed, staring at the ceiling as if lost in thought. Sometimes, Andre would catch her opening her mouth to speak, as though she had something important to say, but the words never came. Instead, she'd shake her head and change the subject. Andre tried to convince himself it was all in his head. After all, relationships go through phases, right? Maybe Sophia was just stressed. Maybe the pressures of married life were getting to her. But as the weeks turned into months, the cracks in their relationship grew deeper, more pronounced. He started noticing patterns he couldn't ignore, like how she'd disappear for hours without a clear explanation, or how her demeanor would shift any time he brought up serious topics. Andre found himself lying awake at night, replaying their interactions in his mind, searching for answers to questions he didn't yet know how to ask. At first, Andre dismissed his concerns as mere overthinking, but the more he tried to ignore them, the more they gnawed at him, like an itch he couldn't scratch. Something was wrong. He didn't know what it was, but deep down he could feel it. The woman he loved, the woman he had vowed to slip his life with, was keeping something from him. And the closer he tried to get to her, the more he seemed to slip away. Andre Peterson wasn't the type of man to pry. He valued trust, believed in giving people their space, and always held himself to the same standard. But as the unease in his marriage grew, so did his doubts. For months, he had brushed aside Sophia's distant behavior, telling himself that love requires patience and understanding. But one night, when Sophia left the house for yet another late client appointment, curiosity got the better of him. The air in the house felt heavy as Andre sat alone on their bed, his mind racing with questions that refused to go unanswered. His eyes wandered to the closet, then to Sophia's dresser. She had always been particular about her things, keeping certain drawers and boxes off limits. Andre had respected that boundary. Until now. Tonight, something inside him snapped. He needed answers. He started cautiously, opening drawers and shifting through neatly folded clothes. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first, just the usual items: hair products, makeup, receipts. But then, tucked away at the back of the closet, hidden beneath a pile of old scarves, he found a small, locked box. The sight of it made his heart pound. He hesitated, questioning himself, but the nagging feeling in his gut pushed him forward. Using a small screwdriver from the garage, he pried the box open, his hands trembling as he did. Inside, he found a stack of documents: birth certificates, medical records, and legal forms. His eyes scanned the papers, and at first they didn't make sense. A name he didn't recognize stared back at him. Elijah Reed. He flipped through the records, his confusion growing. Then, one phrase leapt off the page. Gender reassignment surgery. Andre froze, the weight of the words sinking in like a punch to the gut. His mind raced, piecing together the implications of what he was reading. The woman he had married, the woman he loved, hadn't always been Sophia Reed. She had been born male and had undergone a transition years before they met. Andre's vision blurred as the enormity of the revelation crashed over him. It felt as though the walls of the room were closing in, the air growing thick and suffocating. He dropped the papers onto the bed and sat there in stunned silence, his hands trembling. A flood of emotions surged through him. Shock, confusion, betrayal. He had built his entire life around Sophia, trusted her, loved her unconditionally. And now, it felt as though the foundation of that life had been ripped away. To Andre, this wasn't just a hidden past. It was a betrayal of trust he held sacred. Marriage, in his eyes, was built on honesty and transparency. And yet, Sophia had kept something so fundamental from him. The woman he thought he knew now felt like a stranger. Who was she? What else had she hidden from him? These questions swirled in his mind, unanswered and tormenting. Andre stood, pacing the room as his thoughts grew darker. Memories of their time together flashed before him, her hesitant responses to his questions, the moments she'd seemed on the verge of telling him something but never did. It all made sense now, and yet it didn't. How could she have carried this secret for so long without telling him? The more Andre thought about it, the more betrayed he felt. This wasn't just about the secret itself, it was about what the secret represented. To him, it was a violation of the trust they had built, a deception that cut to the core of his beliefs about love and marriage. Anger began to bubble beneath the surface, mingling with the hurt and confusion. He wanted answers. No, he needed them. But as he sat there, surrounded by the evidence of Sophia's hidden past, a dark thought crept into his mind. Would those answers bring him peace, or would they only deepen the wounds that were already beginning to form? The house was dark when Sophia Reed returned home that evening, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound cutting through the stillness. She stepped inside, setting her keys on the counter, and called out, "Andre?" There was no answer, just an eerie silence that immediately unsettled her. She walked further into the house, her footsteps slow, cautious. That's when she saw him. Andre was sitting at the edge of their bed, the glow of the bedside lamp casting long shadows across his face. Spread out before him on the bed were the documents, the birth certificate, the medical records, and the legal forms. Sophia froze in the doorway, her breath catching in her throat. Her hand instinctively tightened on the doorknob, as though she were preparing to run. "You lied to me." Andre's voice broke the silence, low and trembling, with a mixture of rage and hurt. He didn't look at her as he spoke, his eyes fixed on the papers in front of him. "Who are you, Sophia? No, what are you?" Sophia's heart sank. The day she had feared, the day she had always hoped would never come, was here. She took a tentative step forward, her voice soft and trembling. "Andre, I can explain." Andre shot to his feet, his voice rising as he finally looked at her. "What's there to explain? Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you just going to keep lying for the rest of our lives?" His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his entire body trembling with barely contained anger. Sophia's eyes filled with tears as she tried to find the words. "I was going to tell you," she said, her voice cracking. I didn't know how. I was scared, Andre. Scared of losing you." "Scared of losing me?" Andre barked a bitter laugh. "You think this is about fear? You tricked me into loving you. You let me believe. You let me think." His words faltered, his voice breaking as the weight of his emotions overtook him. "Andre, please, listen to me. This doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change who we are. I love you. I've always loved you." But her words only fueled the fire raging inside Andre. "Doesn't change who you are?" He spat, his voice rising. "You've been lying to me this whole time, Sophia. You've been lying about everything." He began pacing the room, his anger a volatile mix of betrayal and disbelief. Sophia stood frozen, her tears streaming down her face. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to lose you," she pleaded. "You mean everything to me, Andre. I thought if you knew, you wouldn't love me anymore." Andre stopped pacing, his face twisting in fury. "You thought right," he said coldly, his words cutting through the air like a knife. "You didn't just lie to me, Sophia. You made me a fool. Everything we've built, everything I thought we had, it was all a lie." The argument escalated, their voices echoing through the house. Andre's rage grew louder, more frantic, while Sophia's pleas grew more desperate. She tried to explain, tried to make him understand, but he wouldn't hear it. To Andre, this wasn't just a lie. It was a betrayal that cut to the core of who he was, of what he believed in. "Do you know what you've done to me?" Andre shouted, his voice shaking. "You made me love you, trust you, build my life around you, and all this time you've been hiding this secret. How could you do this to me?" Sophia stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. "Andre, please, I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to be loved, to be accepted for who I am. I thought we could get past this." Her voice was barely above a whisper, each word laced with desperation, but Andre was past the point of reason. His anger consumed him, his thoughts spiraling as he tried to process the enormity of what he'd learned. The room felt smaller, suffocating, the weight of their confrontation pressing down on them both. The air between Andre and Sophia was thick with tension, their voices echoing through the house like a storm threatening to tear everything apart. Andre's anger had reached a boiling point, his emotions spiraling beyond control. As Sophia stood before him, her tear-streaked face pleading for understanding, he couldn't see the woman he had once loved. All he saw was betrayal. "I gave you everything," Andre shouted, his voice trembling with rage. "And this is how you repay me? With lies?" Sophia took a step back, her hands raised as if to shield herself from the force of his words. "Andre, please, I didn't mean for it to be like this," she said, her voice cracking. "I love you. I didn't want to lose you." But her words only seemed to push Andre further into the depths of his fury. His chest heaved as he turned away from her, pacing back and forth, his hands clenching into fists. Each step he took seemed heavier than the last, the weight of his emotions dragging him into a dark place he couldn't escape. Without a word, Andre stormed out of the bedroom, his vision clouded by anger. He barely noticed the sound of Sophia's voice calling after him, pleading with him to come back. He made his way to the garage, his footsteps quick and deliberate. Inside, his eyes scanned the cluttered space until they landed on a wrench lying on the workbench. Without hesitation, he grabbed it, the cold metal feeling like an extension of his rage. Back in the bedroom, Sophia's heart raced as she heard Andre's footsteps approaching. When he reappeared in the doorway, holding the wrench in his hand, her breath caught in her throat. She froze, her eyes widening with fear as she realized the depths of his anger. "Andre, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We can talk about this. Just put that down." But Andre was beyond hearing her. His mind was a whirlwind of betrayal, pain, and rage. In that moment, All the love, all the trust he had once felt for Sophia was consumed by the fire of his emotions. Without warning, he raised the wrench and brought it down with terrifying force. The first blow sent Sophia to the floor, a cry of pain escaping her lips before being silenced by the relentless onslaught. Andre's movements were mechanical, his anger driving each swing. The room became a scene of unimaginable horror, the walls bearing witness to a love turned deadly. The bed, the floor, even the pale yellow curtains Sophia had chosen with such care, everything was stained with the consequences of Andre's fury. Minutes felt like hours as the chaos unfolded, and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. Andre stood in the middle of the room, the wrench slipping from his blood-stained hands and clattering to the floor. His chest heaved as he looked down at Sophia's lifeless body, his mind struggling to comprehend what he had done. The rage that had consumed him just moments ago was gone, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. Andre sank to his knees, his body trembling as the weight of his actions began to sink in. His hands, now covered in blood, rested on his thighs as he stared blankly at the floor. The room, once filled with shouting and chaos, was now eerily quiet, save for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. He remained there motionless for what felt like an eternity. The reality of what he had done loomed over him, a shadow that he knew would never leave. Andre Peterson, the man who had once prided himself on his strength, his loyalty, his values, had destroyed everything in a single, irreparable moment. It was Andre himself who picked up the phone, his blood-stained hands trembling as he dialed 911. His voice, hollow and emotionless, cracked as he spoke the words that would alter his life forever. I killed her," he whispered, barely able to get the words out. The operator, trained to handle distressing calls, tried to keep him calm and on the line. "Sir, are you safe? Is anyone else in the home?" The operator asked, their voice steady but urgent, but Andre could barely answer. He sat on the bedroom floor, staring at Sophia's lifeless body, his mind a haze of disbelief and regret. Minutes later, the flashing lights of patrol cars illuminated the quiet Atlanta street. Uniformed officers approached the house cautiously, prepared for anything. Inside, they were met with a scene of chaos and devastation. Blood stained the walls and floor, marking the violent outburst that had taken place, and in the center of it all sat Andre, motionless, his hands resting limply on his thighs, his eyes unfocused. "Drop your weapon," one officer commanded, not immediately noticing that the wrench lay discarded on the floor. Andre didn't move, didn't resist. He simply raised his hand slowly, his expression devoid of any emotion. The officers secured the scene, taking him into custody without incident. But even as they led him outside in handcuffs, his gaze remained distant, as though he couldn't fully comprehend what had just unfolded. Neighbors began to gather outside, drawn by the flashing lights and the commotion. Whispers spread through the small crowd as people tried to piece together what had happened. "What's going on?" one neighbor asked, her voice trembling. Another shook his head, disbelief etched across his face. "That's Andre from down the street. He and Sophia were the perfect couple. No one saw this coming." Inside the house, detectives worked to process the crime scene. They moved methodically through the bedroom, taking photos and gathering evidence. The wrench, covered in blood, lay where Andre had dropped it. One detective, a seasoned investigator, later described the scene as one of the most brutal he had ever witnessed. At the police station, Andre sat in a stark interrogation room, his blood-soaked clothes replaced by a white jumpsuit. Hours passed as detectives tried to break through the wall of silence he had built around himself. Finally, Andre spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I loved her," he said, his eyes fixed on the table in front of him. "But she lied to me." The detective leaned forward, his tone measured but firm. "Andre, do you understand what you've done? Do you realize what this means?" Andre didn't respond, his hands resting limply on the table as if the weight of the world had settled on his shoulders. Outside the station, word of the crime spread rapidly. Family members began to arrive, their faces etched with shock and grief. Sophia's mother collapsed into the arms of a relative, her sobs echoing through the precinct parking lot. "She just wanted to be loved," her mother cried. "She didn't deserve this." Meanwhile, Andre's family struggled to reconcile the man they knew with the crime he had committed. "Andre was always so calm, so in control," his sister said, her voice shaking. "I don't understand how this could happen. This isn't the Andre we know." The trial of Andre Peterson captured the nation's attention, dominating headlines and sparking heated debates on television and social media. In the packed courtroom, every seat was filled as both sides presented their arguments in a case that was as emotionally charged as it was complex. Andre's defense team built their case around emotional distress. They painted a picture of a man whose world had been upended by a revelation so shocking that it pushed him to the brink. This was not the act of a calculated killer, his attorney argued. This was the reaction of a man overcome by pain, betrayal, and confusion. The defense claimed that Andre's actions were a tragic, impulsive response, fueled by emotional devastation, not premeditation. The prosecution, however, presented a starkly different narrative. They argued that Andre's decision to retrieve a weapon from the garage, his relentless assault, and the severity of Sophia's injuries all pointed to premeditation. This was not a crime of passion, the prosecutor declared. This was a deliberate act of violence, a conscious decision to take a life. Photographs of the crime scene were shown to the jury, their graphic nature causing gasps and tears among those in the courtroom. One of the most heart-wrenching moments of the trial came when Sophia's mother took the stand. Through tears, she described her daughter as a kind and compassionate soul who only wanted to be loved and accepted. "Sophia was my baby," she said, her voice trembling. "She had such a big heart. All she ever wanted was to be happy. And now she's gone." Her words hung in the air, a heavy reminder of the life that had been lost. Other testimonies followed, including friends and neighbors who spoke about the couple's seemingly perfect relationship. Some expressed disbelief that Andre could commit such a brutal act, while others recounted moments when Sophia had confided her fears about revealing her past. Each story added another layer of complexity to an already devastating case. Beyond the courtroom, the case ignited a nationwide debate that divided the public. On one side, there were those who viewed Andre as a victim of deception, a man whose life had been shattered by a secret he had a right to know. He was betrayed, some argued. How could anyone expect him to react rationally in that moment? On the other side, there were those who condemned Andre's actions as an inexcusable act of violence, regardless of the circumstances. Advocates for the LGBTQ+ community pointed to the case as yet another tragic example of the dangers faced by transgender individuals, particularly transgender women of color. "This wasn't about betrayal," one activist said in a televised interview. "This was about intolerance and toxic masculinity. Sophia deserved better." As the trial neared its conclusion, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Both sides delivered emotional closing arguments, each trying to sway the jury to their version of the truth. When the verdict was finally read, the room fell silent, the weight of the decision pressing down on everyone present. The jury's verdict was clear. Andre Peterson was found guilty of first-degree murder. As the judge read the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, the courtroom was filled with a heavy silence. For Sophia's family, it was a moment of bittersweet closure. Justice had been served, but no verdict could bring their daughter back. This case is more than just a tragic story of love and betrayal. It highlights the devastating consequences of secrets, unchecked emotions, and societal pressures. Sophia's story serves as a stark reminder of the dangers faced by those who live their truth in a world that doesn't always understand or accept them. The violence and intolerance that marginalized communities endure are a reflection of deep-rooted issues that demand our attention and action. For Andre, a moment of rage cost him everything: a life he had built, a love he cherished, and his freedom. And for Sophia, a decision to withhold a truth out of fear led to the ultimate tragedy. Their story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about trust, identity, and accountability. When trust is broken, how far is too far? At what point do secrets become dangerous? And how can we create a world where honesty and acceptance can coexist without fear? If this story resonated with you, or if you believe these conversations are important, we encourage you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to share stories that matter. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.